Hello and welcome to Season 9, Episode 3 of Solely Singleton. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
And we've got a special guest with us this week. As we promised last, we have Mr. Justin Parnell joining us.
Guys, it's very exciting to be back. I can finally go on record and say, you are my two favorite podcast hosts that are named Brad and Eric that host a Q podcast.
I'll take it.
Thank you. We can't wait to have this wonderful third SCGCon episode with you. So, are you ready to talk about the new SCGCon cubes?
Well, why don't we talk about SCGCon first? Okay, well, I think we've covered it.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So, Justin, we brought you on the podcast to talk about a very important subject that I know you're a big proponent of, which would be the Talismans.
Indeed. Indeed, I am. We've waited for so long. We've waited for 15 years to finish the cycle.
Yep. The cycle that started before the Signets existed.
Yeah, they lapped them. All it took them was 9 months to finish the Signet cycle. What's up with that?
Oh.
Sure, they were all part of the same block, but that's not the Talisman's fault.
It's true. That's true. They should have just put it in the middle of the block right there. It would have fit perfectly, right?
I think so. Yeah, just toss them in. You know, I have a theory that they, given the fact that Fifth Dawn was actually a multicolored set, that they probably, in retrospect, once they got to the development of Fifth Dawn and actually pushed Sunburst and kind of realigned that as like the primary mechanic, even though it was like, it didn't end up that way, but as far as from a design standpoint, I think they probably would have wanted to put the Talismans in throughout the rest of the block. But at that point, they're, Mirrodin's already done. Darksteel's already done, and now you're having to realign the third set and have to go backwards, and you just can't do it. They try to figure out where you put them in for the next X years, never comes up, so then they make a set from scratch and say, you know what, we're just going to put random cards in this set. And thus the birth of Modern Horizons as we know it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Let's talk about the Talismans in detail.
Sounds good.
All right, Eric, before we start off, let's talk about what a Talisman and what a Signet even are. Can you read us Talisman of Dominance?
Okay, Talisman of Dominance is 2 for an artifact. You can tap to add 1 to your mana pool, or you can tap to add blue or black to your mana pool. Talisman of Dominance deals 1 damage to you.
And there are, of course, 10 Talismans, 1 for each color pair. And then read us a random Signet.
Yeah, so Boros Signet is 2 for an artifact. You can pay 1 tap to add red and white to your mana pool.
And of course, there's 10 Signets as well, one named after each guild that does each color pair. So now that we have the baseline for what they are, let's talk about the differences and why Talismans are superior.
I was going to say, just to let everyone, pull back the curtain a little bit. In the show notes for the show, Brad purposefully selected Talisman of Dominance and Boros Signet to display the two extremes of either of these two cycles.
Yeah, it does.
I'm sure it was completely random that you chose those.
Absolutely.
Actually, so Talisman of Dominance, this will get to a point we're going to talk about. Talisman of Dominance was not random because it's the only Talisman I can name and know the color pair that it's attached to because I've cast it enough times.
Yeah, that's fair. Boros Signet was definitely a...
That was just me being a dick.
That was a cheap shot. But, I mean, it does exactly show the disparity between them, though.
Yes. So we're going to be talking specifically about the difference between Talismans and Signets, which ones we prefer. Hint, everyone on the show prefers Talismans, so it's going to be a little bit lopsided, but we'll try to talk about both the pros and cons of each. And in general, get you better informed on this subject so that maybe you can think about changes to how you support either one in your cube.
Brad, I want to be honest. Look, while, yes, ultimately, I'm a supporter of Talismans over Signets, I don't think it's as clear-cut as you're making it seem.
No, I don't either. And for people at home, obviously, in the starter cube, we run the Signets.
Yeah.
Because there's a key con with the Talismans. An Azoria Signet cost me 25 cents to throw in the cube. A blue-white Talisman cost me $7. I don't like Talismans $7 better than Signets. I just prefer them over Signets. It's not a blow it out of the water difference. This is a choice. It's not this one is clearly better than this one. All right, so Mr. Parnell, since we got onto this topic originally because you mentioned your love of the Talismans at SCG Con last year, I would like to have you start off with talking about the pros of the Talismans.
Okay, so the pros of the Talismans only. Because I got a list for both. I got a pros for Signets, and I got a list of pros for Talismans.
Well, we'll start off with the Talisman.
So, there's 3 key factors that I believe make the Talismans superior now that you have access to all 10. Obviously, I think prior to Modern Horizons, when you didn't have access to all 10, and some of the Talismans you had access to were on the low end of cube ability due to the color combination. That's no longer the case. The Talismans, with these 3 factors, I believe, put them as more cubable in general than Signets for a variety of cubes. 1, they're superior for artifact decks. Now, I mean artifact decks is kind of a large swath of things that are basically wanting to put mana-producing artifacts in play, largely irrelevant of the color bonus, where a Talisman is not different too much than a pristine Talisman or a Mind Stone or something like that.
Right, Mind Stone would be my go-to.
The kind of decks that are going to have, like, Tezzerets.
Your Tezzeret decks, your upheaval decks.
Yeah.
You know, things like that basically they just want a critical mass of those, because the fact that you can tap them for a single colorless mana immediately after casting them is huge for those decks. This is even more critical in higher powered cubes because you have a much larger critical mass of those one colorless cards that you can use immediately. Or right. If you're just wanting to cast something else that, let's say you have here, well, why don't we use the difference between Talisman of Dominance, which makes blue and black, and Boros Signets, which makes red and white. Let's say you want to cast a green card. Neither of these 2 cards let you cast a green card, but you want to put a mana artifact in play prior to casting your green 2-drop. You have a forest open, or a forest open.
Yeah.
Talisman of Dominance is going to let you cast your Sylvan Library for 1 and a green, where the only Signets that will be the ones that exactly produce green mana.
Right.
This seems like it doesn't come up, but it comes up all of the time. Especially when you're optimizing your cube decks. And again, the higher power environment you have, this is going to come up more and more frequently. Being able to tap for that 1 mana, the turn you immediately play it. It's absolutely critical.
You were mentioning colorless 1-drops, but just being able to follow it up with turn 1, you don't have a 1-drop. Turn 2, you of course draw your Inquisition of Kozilek.
Yeah.
You got your Talisman in hand, or you got your Signet in hand. If you got your Signet in hand, you're casting your Signet, or you're casting your Inquisition. You got your Talisman in hand, you're casting both.
Exactly.
So this would be the key, like, real advantage in gameplay over a Signet, whereas a Signet's advantage in gameplay we'll get to. But we have some other points here that's worth getting into. So can you lead us into your next point?
Indeed. So a large thing, and this is actually going beyond the playability and more looking at from a cube design standpoint.
Okay.
Traditionally, artifacts that produce mana have somewhat eaten into green's color pie.
Right.
Now, in recent years, the last 2, green has been helped significantly. Not that green was bad. I think green has historically been a pretty great support color. But green is more powerful now than it probably ever has been.
Yeah, I mean, previously, like you said, green was a great support color. You played it to get the elves to ramp you into, playing whatever in white that was busted.
Other stuff, yeah.
Yeah, or blue, more likely, but...
I was going to say, yeah, white, of all the colors right now with the current memes. Great pick.
But it is. I think it is a bonus that the Talismans are technically worse fixers of mana than the Signets are. Now, they're not, because of all the things we mentioned in the first point, but they provide less colors for a single use than a Talisman does, which most decks it's not going to matter, but because of that, it actually requires you to lean a little bit more in your cube design on green, which I do think is a positive, because artifacts taking up design space in a cube from any color, I think, is a kind of a net negative.
Yeah.
Worm coil engine.
Exactly. Yeah. This is actually one of the reasons that white has struggled so much, is because a lot of their identity has actually been tied up partially in things that other colors can do, and artifacts are the greatest enemy, not just to white, but of any color, trying to do a specific thing in a cube, especially when you're trying to design it in a certain way.
Yeah.
So,
And it's worth noting when we're talking about this, Talisman of Dominance versus Dimir Signet, in a blue-black deck, they serve the same purpose. What Justin is saying here is, while with Talisman of Dominance and Dimir Signet, you use them both in your blue-black deck, your blue-white deck is going to be a lot happier running Dimir Signet than it is running Talisman of Dominance. You want to give the ability to destroy the mana base so that you always have access to any color you want to green as part of its pie, as opposed to letting you freely do it with the Signets. Talismans, because they come at that life cost, actually require real cost from you over long games. So you can't use them just as a freebie way of, hey, this is a 2-drop that adds my blue mana or whatever.
and being able to do that immediately, like you said in your example with Inquisition of Kozilek in the first time, there are costs to doing that in cube design, because again, you don't want to take away from something of another color's color pie for an artifact. I'm not saying you never want to do that, but the farther and farther you do that in your cube design, the more you're going to homogenize the experience.
Correct. I don't think it would be correct to say Signets destroy green in the color pie. What Signets do is they encroach on green in the color pie, where when you start chipping away at it, you're starting to deal more and more damage the more times you do stuff like that. Or your Worm Coil engine is better than every green 6-drop, except for maybe Carney T now, but probably still.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those that it can make it so that, in this example, you don't feel as happy when you're drafting green because you can do the same things in colorless. It doesn't give you that incentive of, like, I'm paying the cost of playing forests. What am I getting out of it? If you can do everything else in colorless, well, you know, it kind of sucks. It's not necessarily that far, but...
Yeah, why do I need to draft Farseek to get access to my Watery Grave when I can just draft Dimir Signet so I can splash my Ashiok in my green deck?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that just pushes it to an extreme. Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, they're both taking away from green's color pie, but I think that the Signets do it more, so the Talismans being worse in that aspect, even ignoring the loss of life, which is the next point I'm going to get to. I think that's something that is just notable for just overall cube design.
Yeah, and we're not saying that green decks don't play Signets. Obviously, I'm a proponent of, if you're playing a green deck, a rock that can't get bolted is good to put in at a certain ratio compared to your elves, just so you don't get blown out when you play against the guy with 40 removal spells.
Yeah, I mean, always try and diversify your threats or game plan if you can.
Sure, but I think we can all agree that in green decks, you play less mana rocks than basically any other color.
Yes.
Except maybe red, but...
Maybe. Depends if you have a big red deck or you're doing artifacty stuff.
I think big red decks and big green decks play about the same, I would say, and there's way less big red decks than big green decks. So I think on average, red may play the least number, but the point stands. When you're getting into the decks that play Signets, green will play less than the ones who have to rely on Signets. Green has its other options.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
So, getting back to life, tell us about your life, Justin, and how you will spend it playing Talismans.
Well, this is the most critical point to Talismans. And this is something that I have really talked about in cube design for as long as I have been involved in making content and just designing my cubes, which has been 12 years, 12 or 13. When did Conflux come out? It's when I first designed my cube. 2008, I think, beginning of 2008, 2007.
Something like
one of those years. Long enough ago, over a decade. I think that every single cube, regardless of style, regardless of power level, regardless of size, you have to go out of your way to have a full cube experience to make sure that you are doing everything you can to make aggro decks better. The reason for that, especially in the advent of modern card design, and I especially mean in the last 2 years, mid-range cards and top-end cards, which are crazy at this point, but those cards are so much more powerful for their mana cost than they ever have been.
Yeah, those 4-drop walkers are just absurd in comparison to your 1-drop aggro cards.
Look at Questing Beast.
Yeah.
That's obvious.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're talking, this is poster child for something like this, but those type of things are so ubiquitous across all cubes because they're printing them in every single set. But because of that, aggro decks are going to continue to get inched out because these cards, they're printing at higher mana costs, and by higher I mean like 4.
Right.
Not even like something like 6 anymore. They're so much more powerful, so you have to go out of your way to make aggro decks good. Talismans are strictly better for all aggro decks for every single cube than Signets because it costs you a life every time you want access to a non-colorless mana. And over the course of a single cube draft, that adds up if all of your players across all of the games are tapping to pay life for mana with their Talismans. It's absolutely critical. If there was no other reasons, if all these other things I said about Talismans were inferior to Signets, this reason alone would have me running Talismans in all of my cubes.
Yeah, I'm absolutely there with you. I was just going to say that exact same thing. That the damage that it does to you, in my opinion, is the most important for a healthy cube environment. And it's just because this fixing comes at a cost. And that cost is life. If you're up against the aggro deck, you have to really make the decision, is this one life worth it? Mm-hmm. Or should I wait a turn kind of thing? Like, should I just not take the damage and wait a turn? Or is my Inquisition really truly worth it right now type thing? And yeah, I mean, most of the time taking the damage is worth it, but that still adds that interaction in the cube, and the fact that exists is just, I think, better design in general.
And I think this goes back to the last point too, and I want to tie that together of there will be less abuse cases with Talismans because it makes the aggro matchups slightly worse. Mm-hmm. You won't be jamming them in just for the hell of it because you can, and whatever, I'm a blue X deck, so I'm going to jam in all of the Signets that are blue because there's no real downside for me. Suddenly, it's maybe I just want to play that Mind Stone instead of randomly splashing a third color with this other Talisman. Because it's got the upside of draw a card versus the upside of hurt myself for my blue.
Right.
And that's a real cost. And especially over the course, if you're playing 3 rounds, how much damage are you going to take from that Talisman against aggressive decks in those 3 rounds because you're forced to? And that makes a difference. Yeah. You have to just make sure that your aggro decks are supported, because it takes no effort to make mid-range decks good in cube. None. You can throw darts and randomly create a cube, and the mid-range deck would be the best deck.
Which is ironic compared to a decade ago, but
yes, yeah. But we're going to continue down this path.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's pretty clear with design philosophy now that they're printing good aggro cards. I don't want to take that away. Knight of the Ebon Legion is probably the best black 1-drop in cube, in my opinion.
At least aggressive.
Yeah, for an aggressive deck. Yes. Yeah. So they're going to get tools, but because they're designing those cards for constructed, they're assuming that you're going to have access to 4 of those.
Right.
It's the Gravecrawler effect, right? Gravecrawler is a great card.
When you have 4.
But in traditional cubes, you have 1. Yeah, but yeah, exactly. So you have to modify your cube design to have something like Gravecrawler. And aggro cards are designed with that in mind because, from a constructive standpoint, you have 4, but for a cube standpoint, in most cases, we only have 1, so we're going to get those tools for aggressive decks less frequently than the mid-range and the control decks and the ramp and all of these other things that start at 4 mana, and even 3 mana in some cases with some of these planeswalkers and cards.
Yeah.
But that's a whole topic.
I mean, on that, I think that the fact that they don't print the 1-drop elves, like the 1-drop actual, like, Elvish Mystic or whatever, they don't really want to put that in formats anymore. It means that their mid-range curve is skewing more towards 3 and 4 than it was 4 and 5. And I think that's just going to continue to happen more and more if they don't accept that maybe mana elves are a good thing.
Yeah, and I think, 10 years ago, I remember just in Constructed, I played Jund in its first iteration, and Jund is the quintessential mid-range deck, especially during its time in Standard, and they were playing
yeah.
Broodmate Dragon as a mid-range threat. And it costs 6 mana.
Yep.
That type of thing would cost
it would be
it
4
wouldn't be
drop.
exactly 4 mana, but it would be a similar card that would cost 4 mana. It would be 3 3s, but 2 3 3s for 4 is worlds better than 2 4 4s for 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that's the type of thing that's the world that we're moving to. So aggro has to be a focus. Every cube, and I mean every cube. Combo cubes, I think it's also critical there because you have to have the
It's
the guards to make sure.
The fun police.
Yeah, it's the fun
police,
police. If you're trying to do things that are too cute, well, you're just going to die to the aggro deck because you didn't have the answers.
Yeah, stop dicking around.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just, it helps the health of a cube format, of really any format, but, I mean, we're talking cube because that's what we're designing.
Definitely. All right, so those are my 3 points pro Talismans. Again, I think the third point is the most critical, but the other two I think are definitely notable and something you want to take into consideration when you're deciding to probably make the switch. And I think that's what really most people are evaluating.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty rare that you're going to say, oh, I have this cube. I didn't have Signets, but maybe I want Talismans now.
Right.
Yeah, that could depend.
The one thing I do want to bring up is if you're switching, I've noticed that when we did the switch, people were paying that life a lot more freely than they do, you know, a year later down the road when they've actually realized, okay, this is actually a cost that exists. Maybe we need to actually think about it.
Yeah, it's a real drafter learning experience. So let's talk about some pros of the Signets. And some of these sound comical, but they're real because you have to think about Magic from more than just numbers.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not playing on a spreadsheet, as much as I would like that, because I love spreadsheets. We are playing in real life with people, and there's other factors. Okay, number one, I know you guys have talked about this on the show before. I do not know what the Talisman's color combinations are.
Yeah,
if you threw them, I could literally say Talisman of and then make up one, and could probably convince you that was the red-green Talisman. Or, excuse me, the red-blue Talisman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brad ran that by me, and I was like, I don't know, dude. I don't know.
Yeah, I believe that was Hot Takes. I made him close it, and I listed off multiple Talismans and asked him to color code them, and he got them wrong.
And I think I added, Curiosity as an old one, because I was just reading it, and I was like, yeah, Curiosity, that's the one. And it's like, wait a second. Shit.
So, but look, so I have... Speaking of spreadsheets, I keep, in addition to keeping my cube on Cube Tutor, I keep it in a spreadsheet.
It's a good idea.
And every single time that I go to adjust a talisman, I literally have to look it up every single time.
Yep.
It gets so old. And I'm like, I just do not know. To this day, I know Curiosity and Creativity are the blue-green and the blue-red ones, but I do not know which is which. I think Curiosity is the blue-green.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure.
I will 100% back you up on this. This is 100% the exact pair that I confused myself on, along with, I think it's green-black and black-white are also flipped in what I want them to be. One's Hierarchy and one is, I don't even remember.
Hierarchy's black-white. Is it like Resilience?
Black-green?
I don't remember.
I actually don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is my point, though, and I have a strong hatred of the Talisman's vague naming scheme.
I even have issues with the old ones still. I
Yeah,
do not
we've been
remember
running those
Impulse
for
is
forever.
red and green.
I don't remember the red-green one. I know black-red is Indulgence. I know Progress is white-blue. I know Dominance
I know
is
Dominance.
blue-black.
That's the only one I know.
Unity is blue-white.
No, Progress is blue-white.
Yeah, no.
Unity's white-green.
Green-white. That's what I was
However,
trying to say.
I did not
can't
remember
say
Unity
words.
until you said it. So,
Yes.
point to Signets big time.
Yes.
Now, I don't think anyone should take this into consideration when making their cube, but the Talismans will piss you off. Guaranteed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially
From a
the old
naming
ones
standpoint.
Especially the old ones with the pictures, because they're all the same thing and they're all washed out, so you don't really see it's blue and black.
This goes
so
right into
true.
the next one. It's the originals have the same black background with a vague disc art, and because they're from Mirrodin, there's no color on the card. They're just monocolor it's grayscale.
They're grayscale, yeah.
So
They
if
tried,
you have
yeah,
a
they
f-
tried that for exactly one block. Then we're like, nah,
It was a terrible.
it's not
idea.
worth it.
Yeah.
It was a terrible idea.
So okay, so fake point number one. Literally don't know what any of the talismans are named. Okay, so real point number one. The flavor, the art, and the style of the signets are far superior than talismans, and I actually don't even think it's in the neighborhood of being close.
No, I agree with you.
And the talisman or the signets all have 2 arts, and both of the arts are better than the talisman's arts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
At least
new-
for the first half. The second half I kind of like. I kind of like it. It's on par with the signets to me.
I say I disagree. I think the flavor. Okay, so one, if you have a Ravnica cube, and I guess if I say Ravnica cube, of course you're going to play the signets. But the Boros and Azorius and Dimir and Golgari, like those are words that are meaningful to like every Magic player.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that carries something. You have
Yes.
you have the watermark on the bottom of each of the signets. Like,
You have a watermark for the art of the signet.
yeah.
Yeah.
These
That's
little
true.
things they add up, and they're not. These don't have to go into the design of a cube and the playability, but when you're looking at them, I'm much happier to look at a signet than a talisman and play with it. Even again, not from a playability standpoint, but just an emotional response.
Well, I mean,
From a drafter standpoint, though, when I'm opening up a pack and I see a signet, there's a much shorter period of time where my brain is processing the signet than a talisman.
Yeah.
I'm wasting less energy of my brain in a draft looking at a signet than I am looking at a talisman. And that's it's a real thing that you have to think about from like the price your drafter is paying for that. It's not something that I would ever make signet over talisman because of that point. But I'm sure someone out there, that's a real issue with them. That's a hang up.
I mean, it also comes up even in gameplay. I can't imagine how many times I've asked what talisman is on the other side of the field, even though I asked it 2 turns ago, because I just forgot and the art doesn't help me and I don't know what the name is. Whereas,
Screw the field. With you, how many times has it happened during a Minesweeper draft?
yeah, multiple times even in one.
100% of the time.
Yeah, because and there's just so many cards. There's so much other things to think about that you like. You ask it, you get the information, you parse it for that amount of time, and then the game gets more complex or the draft gets more complex, and you just forget because it's like it's not obvious, and that doesn't happen with signets. Once you know it once, you're just like, oh yeah, it's a Boros signet, cool.
Yep.
Totally. Now, this was the next point was one that Brad you brought up earlier, and this is definitely something that I think every cube owner has to consider, and that is the cost of these cards is a world of difference. Like the cost in dollars.
Right, the actual real world monetary.
I think it's easier if you have a new cube. You're making a new cube and you're like, I want to make this the best cube that I can be. I think the talismans are a much clearer choice. But if you're moving from the signets to the talismans and you're like, I have these, I might even have foil versions of these.
Yeah.
Do I want to move to these talismans? And the non-foil versions, a set of 10 is going to cost me $25?
Yeah, and then you look at the foil versions.
Well, no, you don't look at the foil versions because once you realize the non-foils are 20, you are out.
Yeah, that's true.
But let me tell you, there are more. There are more. But that is a real cost. You know, you have to make a decision. Is the playability that I'm going to get out of that, is this worth the monetary cost to me? And not every single cube owner is just throwing that out the window and say, I just want the best thing for my cube, or I don't care that I have a Azorius Signet from Dissension foil. I want to have non-foil $7 Talisman of Progress. That's a hard choice for cube owners. It really is.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's not even just that immediate decision. Like, most people have a certain budget that they can put into buying Magic cards. So if you make the decision to buy this talisman for $7 or whatever, that means your next decision when the new set comes out, you might not be able to buy the new hotness that you're excited for.
Because you just bought these talismans that made a minor upgrade in your cube.
Right. Yeah, I mean, price does matter. It sucks. It really does, but, you know, you gotta be smart about what you're spending your money on most of the time.
Yeah, it's definitely a factor. And the next set you're going to put 10 cards in your cube because that's how Magic works now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
definitely.
make sure to save up your money for the new double triple boosters coming to you for our double triple masters
For
next
double,
year
triple
May.
the price.
For quadruple, octuple the price, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's double, triple, so it's 6 times the price
Yeah.
because they times those. Okay, so my last point, and this is the one that actually has the most effect on cube design, but it doesn't affect every single cube, which is why I think ultimately the Talismans are superior. Let's say you have a heavily multicolored cube, maybe even a multicolored cube, where you don't have monocolored cards, or very minimal, maybe for fixing type purposes.
Right.
The Signets are just better. You just want as many color pips because green is irrelevant to its fixing nature for your cube. If green's fixing, doesn't matter in whatever cube you have, and oftentimes it's multicolored cubes, or maybe it's a combo-centric cube, something like that. If green's fixing is irrelevant.
The most common version of this is also just going to be Ravnica themed cubes. Those tend to be if I had to say, of all the multicolored base cubes on the planet, 85-90% of them are just someone's Ravnica theme cube. So it's a non-issue for them, but yes, for anyone else, it's also just when every fourth card in your cube is multicolor, suddenly the Talisman's downside is just that. You need to be able to cast your white, red 4-drop in the multicolor heavy cube.
Yeah, that colorless mana, that generic mana symbol on Talisman of Dominance is a limiting factor to its playability in your deck. You actually just want as many pips as you possibly can when you tap it for mana, and the Signets provide that. So they're not, there are types of cubes where the Signets are better. I think that is a clear one. Budget-conscious ones is another one. And of course, they look badass, and Talismans don't.
That's fair.
And I just do.
Yeah.
And I know what they do.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, my vote is for Talismans, but I've never played someone's cube in the last year, and if they have Signets in their cube, I've never questioned Signets rather than Talismans.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the same with me. It's not something where I'd go, why are you running Signets over Talismans? Don't you know that there's a 0.3 percentage point increase in how much your cube's design will... It's not worth it. Just enjoy Magic.
I know I'm probably one of the few people who just don't care about cycles at all. Like, it's a non-factor to me. But I want to bring up the fact that it's okay to run some Talismans and some Signets.
We ran that for years.
Yeah.
Like literally half a decade plus, we ran Talismans and Signets mixed.
But that was because you'd had access to 5 Talismans and 10 Signets.
Sure, but the point stands that this is something that for some people this is obvious, but for people who now have access to all of them, we've already done that. It's not taboo.
Yeah,
just go for it.
It's the kind of thing, like, if you have most of the Signets, but you want to add red, white,
Boros,
Talisman of Conviction, that's okay.
Never would have got it. Wasn't even on my radar.
I don't even know.
I had to look it up.
That might not be it. Eric, you could have just said a word. Yep, that's the red white one for sure.
Yeah, so it's like if you have all the other Signets and you just want to add, you've got your Boros aggro decks and you want to help them out a little bit, put in the Talisman. Cool. That's fine. I know not everybody likes the idea of breaking cycles, but sometimes maybe it's a good decision for you.
I also lied. I even break the rule in the starter cube. We don't run 10 Signets because 3 of the Talismans were cheaper than 3 of the Signets, so I ran them.
There you go.
So see, I still do it today even when I have the options.
Yeah.
Price matters.
Yep. Especially when you're trying to get 360 cards to cost $100. Let me tell you.
Yeah, you gotta pinch those pennies together, squeeze them together, see if Azorius Signet pops out.
Yeah.
I think that while we're talking about a game of inches between Talismans and Signets, I think it's a good discussion to have because this is a question that comes up because people have had Signets in their cube for years. Is it worth the swap? And I hope that the things that we've talked about today hopefully kind of lead you in a direction to making that decision for your own cube.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And on that note, let's head out of here for the evening, guys.
Sounds good.